Okay, I'll look for it too, and we'll reconvene, right? I'm looking in chapter 8. It's probably going to be, chapter 8, verse 9. But take care that this right of yours, this freedom to eat meat offered to idols, does not somehow become a stumbling block to the weak. For if anyone sees you who have knowledge eating in an idol's temple, will he not be encouraged, if his conscience is weak, to eat food offered to idols, right? And I think that's the overarching principle here, is this weak conscience is seen in perhaps a new Christian, a new convert, right? Who is still learning about the black and white, who is still gaining the knowledge of what is right and what is wrong. And if they had participated in this idolatrous worship and then they become a Christian, it's like, ooh, that hurts my conscience. As a Christian, I can't go back into that temple and participate in eating those foods. That hurts my conscience. And so they're passing by the temple one day and they see me, chowing down on a nice T-bone, and that hurts their conscience such that it's like, well, if this person does it, maybe it's okay. And so they do something that they believe is wrong, wounding their own conscience. They sin, right? I've negatively influenced them. So again, it's not that I don't have freedom. It's not that I have to defer everything that I want to do, and I can't, I can't do anything that might offend anyone. I'm not going to flaunt it, right? I'm not going to flaunt my freedoms in such a way that another person is going to be negatively impacted. Okay, does that answer your question? I think we'll get into it a little bit more deeply in chapter 8. Okay. So the example here that Paul uses to kind of combat their hedonistic mentality, he starts in verse 13. Food is meant for the stomach, and the stomach for food. That's a quotation from another Corinthian, I believe, philosopher. And Paul responds to it. He says, okay, food is meant for the stomach and the stomach for food. And Paul says, God will destroy both one and the other. The body, and notice here, the wording here is very important. The body is not meant for sexual immorality, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body. And God raised the Lord and will also raise us up bodily. There will be a bodily resurrection by his power. Do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ? Shall I then take the members of Christ and make them members of a prostitute? Never. Or do you not know that he who is joined to a prostitute becomes one body with her? For as it is written, the two will become one flesh. Why is Paul saying this? This is a perfect example. Paul is saying, you believe that whatever you do in the body is distinct from, it has no impact on the spirit. And he says, no, we go all the way back to the garden when it says that Adam and Eve came together and they were one flesh. So if a person is engaged in sexual immorality and they become one flesh with someone that they have no right to do that with, that impacts not only their body, but also their soul. So that's the example that Paul is using here to combat their mentality of those two pieces being distinct. Verse 17, but he who is joined to the Lord becomes one spirit with him. So what's the conclusion? What's the application here? Verse 18, flee from sexual immorality. Don't give it a place, right? Every other sin a person commits is outside the body, but the sexually immoral person sins against his own body. Or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God? You are not your own. That is such an important statement there. You are not your own, for you were bought with a price, so glorify God in your body. And I think that has direct application to the decisions that we make that I know might negatively impact someone else. I'm not my own anymore, right? Stephen doesn't belong to Stephen anymore. Before I became a Christian, I was out in the world, I was doing my own thing. I owned myself, I think is kind of what Paul is referring to here. But when we became Christians, whenever we put our hand to the plow, as it were, and we pledged allegiance to follow Jesus, we became his disciple. That was a commitment, right? When we made that commitment, when we became his servant, we in essence gave ourselves away. We gave ourselves over to him. I don't own myself anymore, right? And so whatever freedoms that I would hold on to and say, this is what I want to do and no one's going to take my freedom away from me, let's be careful, right? We're not our own. We were bought with a price. Thinking about overcoming temptation, thinking about making righteous decisions. I think this is helpful. This has been helpful for me, right? Stephen doesn't call the shots anymore, right? And so we can decide before we're ever put in a situation, right? In this situation, this is what I'm going to do. This is the decision I'm going to make. So that way, when the circumstance avails itself and we find ourselves in a tempting situation, I can say, I've already decided, right? I've already chosen. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm not going to do, right? I decided a long time ago, and therefore it's not on me to make the decision now. It's already been decided, right? We don't belong to ourselves. We've been purchased, right? And so we defer to the person, to the being who purchased us, and that is God, right? He purchased us, therefore he has the right to instruct us, to guide us, to tell us what he would have us to do. Okay, I'm preaching, sorry. All right, let's talk a little bit more deeply about what God calls us to do with our bodies. Number one, we can argue from this section that we should take care of them, right? We should take care of them. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, look in verses 19 and 20. Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God? We should take care of our bodies. Now, does that mean that you have to, drink spinach smoothies every morning? I don't think so, right? Thankfully. There's a balance here, right? I'm not going to do anything that negatively impacts or I know that harms my body, but we don't have to go to the other extreme either. There's a balance there, right? I'm going to have a healthy lifestyle. I'm going to take care of myself. God has blessed me with health. I'm going to be a good steward over the body that he has given to me to the best of my ability, right? And where you want to draw that line, as far as how healthy or how many Twinkies you're going to eat per day, that's up to you, right? But the principle is at least there that we should take care of our bodies. Number two, we should discipline them. We should have them under control. Drop down to chapter 9, please. Would someone like to read 24 through 27? 1 Corinthians 9, 24 through 27.
Do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may win. And everyone who competes in the game exercises self-control in all things. They then do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable.
Through 27, please. Yeah.
Therefore, I run in such a way as not without aim. I box in such a way that not beating the air. But I buffet my body and make it my slave, lest possibly after I have preached to others, I myself should be disqualified.
Okay. If you're taking notes, you can also write down Romans 6 and verse 12. Romans 6 and verse 12, Paul says, let not sin therefore reign in your mortal body to make you obey its passions, right? So again, it comes back down to who's calling the shots, right? Who gets to choose? Whenever we're faced with temptation, what choice are we going to make? Paul says, I keep my body under control, right? I have it mastered. I have it controlled. So that way I don't give myself over to those passions that were sinful, that I used to live in, that we used to live in, right? So God calls us to take care of our bodies. He calls us to discipline them. Let's not use our bodies, Romans chapter 6, and this is verse 13, by the way. Let's not use our bodies as instruments for unrighteousness, but as instruments for righteousness. Right? John, go ahead.
I just was thinking in Hebrews it says we're to offer our bodies as a living sacrifice.
Yeah,
You think about what that
that's a good one.
is to do that.
Yeah,
That's not an easy thing always.
yeah. Oh man, you just reminded me of you reminded me of something that I forgot what you reminded me of. Norman, don't laugh at me. Living sacrifices. Okay, so in Romans chapter 6, we've put to death the old man, right? We've put him to death. We go down in the water and he stays there. He doesn't come back up with us, right? We rise to walk in newness of life. And so not only in baptism are we making a commitment, but there's also a sense in which a part of us dies, right? Our right to choose our own way, we kill that. We put that to death. We mortify that, I believe is what Paul says there. And that's a decision that we not only make at baptism at the time of our conversion, that we have to make every day, right? Telling ourselves no. It's much easier when you're, telling your toddler no. Sometimes we have to tell ourselves no, right? We have to keep ourselves on a short leash, depending on what kind of day we're having, what kind of mentality we're in, what kind of headspace we're in for, a broader period of time. That discipline might need to be more lenient or more, constrictive, depending on where we are, depending on what we're struggling with. So it can be a fluid thing, depending on how we're doing. Number 3. So take care of them. We should discipline them. Number 3, magnify Christ through them. Magnify Christ through them. So look in chapter 6 and verse 20. He says, you were bought with a price, so glorify God in your body. God can be glorified through the things that we do in our bodies, right? Just our actions, our behaviors. These things can be glorifying to God. Philippians chapter 1 and verse 20. Philippians chapter 1 and verse 20, Paul says, it is my eager expectation and hope that I will not be at all ashamed whenever he passes, whenever he's put to death for the gospel, but that with full courage, now as always, Christ will be honored in my body, whether by life or by death. Whether things go really well for me or whether things go really badly for me. I want to glorify God. I want my choices and my decisions to adorn the gospel, right? That's Titus chapter 2, verses 11 through 13. Paul is talking about making the gospel, making Christianity beautiful, making it appealing to people, right? So we walk out those doors and people know that we're Christians. Am I a good advertisement or am I a bad advertisement? I spend a lot of time on the interstate throughout the week, like I-95, and sometimes there are company vehicles for specific companies, and they always seem to be menaces on the interstate. I don't know why. Maybe it's the same person like in this company vehicle, but whenever I see one of those company vehicles now, I assume it's like, okay, that guy's probably driving crazy, right? What kind of message does that send, having your company logo and one of your employees is out driving that company vehicle, building a reputation for your company as not being the most, polite of drivers? That's not a good advertisement, right? And that's a nice analogy for how we conduct ourselves. Am I a good advertisement? Do my claims to follow Jesus, do they line up with my behavior? Or do they contradict? Are they opposed to each other, right? So Paul says, whether by life or whether by death, I want to be a good advertisement. I want to adorn the gospel. I want to make it appealing to people. I want to honor him through my choices. Okay, and then number 4, this is actually what you cited. Present them as living sacrifices to God, Romans chapter 12 and verse 1. Present them as living sacrifices to God. So, any comments on that section, those 4 points. Okay, go ahead.
I'm going back to where, I don't remember where exactly it was. Was it Moses, when he got the people together and he told them they had to separate themselves from the foreign wives that they married.
Mm.
And I said, now how hard would that have been, knowing that I have to forget about my wife and my family because it was not the right wife, and I made a family from that wife, and likewise the women had to separate themselves from the husbands because of the choices that they made.
Right.
In order to stay in a relationship with God, that like I said, I don't remember if it was Moses in Deuteronomy or Joshua, but there was one passage where they were supposed to do this in order to wipe away the animosity that God had against Israel because of the position they put themselves in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so are you kind of drawing application back to how we...
16 there where,
Oh, I see. Okay.
yeah,
Okay. Back in chapter 6?
yeah.
Okay, or do you not know that he who is joined to a prostitute becomes one body with her, for as it is written, the two will become one flesh. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, so that's actually a good example. So the passage you were citing there was Ezra chapter 10. Ezra chapter 10, verses 11 through 14. And if you'll remember, why did Judah specifically go away into captivity? Why did they go away into captivity?
Sexual immorality.
Okay, and idolatry, right? And that idolatry was introduced to the people because they were intermarrying with the Canaanites, the people of the land, right? God tells them they're at the Jordan River. God says you need to push the people out, right? Don't leave anyone left in the land, because if you do, they're going to negatively influence you to do what is wrong. They didn't push the people out. They had relationships with the people. And all of a sudden, idolatry starts popping up among God's people. Eventually, it gets so bad that God sends Judah away into captivity, into Babylon, right? They come back after going away into captivity, and what do? They start marrying people of the land again, right? They just went away for 70 years, right? They come back and they start doing the exact same thing. And so it says in Ezra chapter 10, Ezra tears his clothes. It's like, guys, how have we not learned our lesson, right? It's like we just talked about this. And so the principle was there. It's like, okay, presumably there's some sort of support. It's not just you abandoning your families with your wife and your children, that you shouldn't be in this relationship and so just abandon them. Presumably there would be some sort of like financial care, still like a relationship there, but not the marriage relationship between you and the people of the land, right? So yeah, kind of applying that to verse 16. Yes, sir.
I think what strikes me about this topic specifically is self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And being willing and able to look yourself in the mirror
Yeah.
and identify what it is you struggle with and make a list. And then
Yeah.
it can be overwhelming to look
Yeah.
at that. You got to chip away one thing at a time.
Yeah.
And I think although Andrew and I are blessed, and we struggle with is having dessert in the house, right? So, we set up a measure.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen in the house.
Sure.
But then what happens is we'll cave in every once in a while.
Sure.
And I think now
Yeah.
that mentality, applying it more to Christianity it's tough because in humbling we're imperfect humans.
Mm-hmm.
And if we give in, that's why we have to be right with God and ask for forgiveness, and then
Yeah.
almost start the process all over again.
That's right. Yeah.
It's a cycle.
Yeah. And it's like once you pass through that first filter of what's right and what's wrong. I'll speak for myself. Whenever I became a Christian, it's like, okay, so where is the line? And then if it's something that I still want to do, can I get kind of close to the line without crossing it? Right? It's like, I don't want to cross the line. I don't want to sin. But it's like, I want to kind of get away with the things that I'm able to get away with, right? But then it's like I've found that hopefully as I've matured, I don't want to get close to the line anymore. It's like I've tried that. It doesn't work. I don't like the consequences. And so it's like, okay, I'm not even trying to get close to the line anymore. And so it's like it's that self-awareness of knowing where I'm weak that is completely independent of anyone else. It's just me. It's like, okay, I know where my weaknesses are, and then I can draw the line more restrictive on myself. I can draw standards for myself that I'm not going to apply to anyone else, but I'm going to keep myself on a short leash with this specific things, with this specific area. I spend a lot of time on my phone, right? And so it was just a time waster for me. And so I think I have 3 or 4 different apps on my phone, all kind of running in conjunction. I have no social media, I have no games, I have no news. My phone is a brick, right? I can text, I've got WhatsApp and I've got email and things, and I do have the ESPN app. But other than that, my phone is a brick, right? The principle here is, it's like, okay, I saw something in myself that was not helpful, that was arguably controlling me, that was habit forming. It's like, all right, I'm going to get rid of all that. I'm going to draw those lines tighter for myself because I want to make better choices, right? And we can take those principles and we can apply them to each one of us, right? The lines that you have to draw might be entirely different from, how you use your phone or what foods you have in the house. You probably need to draw some lines, right? You probably need to make some standards for yourself to keep yourself on a short leash to prevent us from crossing the line, right? Again, we don't bind those on anyone else, but we make those choices for ourselves. So yeah, that self-awareness is key, right? Very good. Present them as living sacrifices to God, Romans 12 and verse 1. Present them as living sacrifices to God. Okay. The next topic we have is kind of large. There's no way we're going to cover it. We'll introduce it, and then, Lord willing, we'll wrap it up next week. Look in verse 19. 1 Corinthians 6, verse 19. It says, "Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you?" And I have here 4 points about the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. If you want to make a preacher get nervous, start asking questions about the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, right? Because it's a fact. That's point number 1. The indwelling of the Holy Spirit is a fact, but how you interpret this has implications that kind of get hairy very quickly, right? And so we've got some passages here that we'll look at, and hopefully we'll explain this adequately. Number 1, the fact of his indwelling. It's a fact, right? Look in Galatians 4 and verse 6. And we'll slow down here. We've only got 5 minutes. So we'll take our time looking at a few passages, and then we'll come back to this, Lord willing, next week. Thank you, Donna. Okay, Galatians chapter 4. Would someone like to read verses 4 through 6?
But when the fullness of the time was come, God sent forth his Son, made of a woman, made under the law, to redeem them that were under the law, that we might receive the adoption of sons. And because ye are sons, God has sent forth the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father.
God has sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, okay? And by the way, we'll bring that up next week. We'll save that for next week. Go to 2 Timothy 1. Go to 2 Timothy 1. Someone read verses 13 through 14, please. 2 Timothy 1, 13 through 14.
Hold fast the pattern of sound words which you have heard from me, in faith and love which are in Jesus Christ. That good thing which was committed to you, keep by the Holy Spirit who dwells in us.
Okay, great. He dwells in us, right? We've seen in Galatians chapter 4, God has sent the Spirit of His Son to dwell in us, in our hearts. 2 Timothy 1, verse 14, the Holy Spirit who dwells within us. Go to Romans chapter 8. Romans 8, someone else read verses 8 through 11.
So then they that are in the flesh cannot please God. Keep going.
Yes, please, through 11.
But ye are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit, if so be that the Spirit of God dwell in you. Now if any man have not the Spirit of Christ, he is none of his. And if Christ be in you, the body is dead because of sin, but the Spirit is life because of righteousness. But if the Spirit of him that raised up Jesus from the dead dwell in you, he that raised up Christ from the dead shall also quicken your mortal bodies by his Spirit that dwelleth in you.
Okay. Thanks, John. So in verse 9, how do you know that you are not in the flesh, but you're in the Spirit? If what? If the Spirit dwells in you, then you know that you're not in the flesh, but you're in the Spirit. Okay? Anyone who does not have that Spirit of Christ does not belong to Him. If Christ is in you, okay, so we have the Spirit, verse 9. We have Christ in us, verse 10. Although the body is dead because of sin, the Spirit is life because of righteousness. If the Spirit of Him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, so he says it like 4 different times in verses 8 through 11 here, that the Spirit of Christ dwells in us, that Christ dwells in us, verse 9, that the Spirit dwells in us, Christ dwells in us, verse 10. If the Spirit of God dwells in you, verse 9, it's a fact, right? And so what we'll talk about next week is the purposes of His indwelling, the knowledge of His indwelling, and the limitations of His indwelling, right? All very important points. But the point that we'll kind of leave it at here this morning is God dwells in us, right? And so we'll look at some more passages next week that get into the nuts and the bolts of what that looks like, what that means, and what that doesn't mean, right? Because those are very important points. Yes, sir. Oh, yeah. That's a good point, too. What do you mean by that? What are you thinking? Right. That's right. Yeah, and you actually, you see that exact point there in Romans chapter 8, verses 8 through 11. You know that you're not in the flesh. You know that you're in the Spirit because God dwells in you, right? That is the evidence, that is the sign to you that He dwells in you. It doesn't happen for people in the world, right? Because God cannot associate with, God cannot have fellowship with unrighteousness. And so when I'm in the world, God does not dwell in me, right? God does not have fellowship with me, right? Okay, you got me back into preaching mode again. Sorry. We'll leave it there. But Lord willing, next week we'll answer some more questions about what this indwelling looks like. So thank you all very much.